Hi, everyone. It's Judy Boxner. This is a take two live from the world. Oh, my God.
You can tell we've been at a conference all day.
Yeah. So we're at the Big Sky Literacy Conference in Montana, and I am so honored to be here with Tiffany Hogan. So, Tiffany, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yes, I'm a speech language pathologist by training. And when I would see young children for speech and language difficulties, what I noticed is that I would dismiss them, quote unquote, from therapy. They would be making great progress. And then I would hear from their parents. They would call me once they were in first, second, third grade, and they would say, these children are struggling now. They're not able to read. So I started to think about the connection between language and reading. This was a long time ago. And I first read Hugh Katz's book, Language and Reading Disabilities. That connected me with him, and I ended up working with him on my PhD. We still are longtime collaborators. I've recently published in the last couple of years. So we've been working together for over 20 years. And in that work, I've been able to work on assessment for children with speech and language difficulties, including children with developmental language disorder and dyslexia. We've worked on interventions. We've studied longitudinally the connections between early speech and language and later literacy. I'm also a mom of 3 neurodivergent children. So I've learned a lot as a mother and a scientist and a speech language pathologist.
So tell me a little bit about how can we get SLPs more involved in our buildings? Because very often I'll have conversation with SLPs in buildings, and they often say, we would love to help. And I know that they have so much knowledge, and they are experts very often in the science of reading, but they'll often say, our caseload is filled, we don't have time. And I think principals sometimes don't even communicate that much with SLPs. How can we change that?
It's a huge problem, and I think it's very systemic because speech language pathology as a field has such a broad scope of practice. You know, a speech language pathologist, when we go through our master's program, we learn how to work with adults who have had strokes. We learn how to work with traumatic brain injury. We work with young children with all types of different differential diagnoses and syndromes. We work with persons, children, adults who have swallowing difficulties. We work with stuttering, language problems, speech problems. And so I think the problem truly is that our scope of practice is quite wide. When I was working in schools, I would go see a child who had a tracheotomy, clear their trach, work with them on communication, using a board to communicate, alternative augmentative communication. I would then go work with, speech sound disorder. I would work with a child who had traumatic brain injury. It was a lot. And so I think that we have to have a better sense of, what are we doing? How can we maybe specialize a little bit more? And then also, how can we reduce our caseloads? Because the caseloads are so broad as related to that broad issue. I also think sometimes in schools, there's that divide between general education and special education.
Yep.
And speech pathologists are in that special education group. And also sometimes they're even out of that group and they're contracted by an agency and they'll go into the school. So they don't really work for the school. They're just in the school serving.
So they're really, almost seen like an outsider.
Yeah, they're outsiders. And they're, so I think there's a lot of issues that we really have to break down systemically to have a better sense of how to work together. It's a huge problem. We have to break it down.
Yeah, worries me. So can you tell us a little bit more about DLD for our listeners today and what that is and how it manifests and how we could support students with DLD?
DLD is developmental language disorder. It is when a child has difficulty understanding or using language. The main area of difficulty for children who have DLD is learning vocabulary and remembering vocabulary words and learning syntax. So the grammar of the language. This affects their ability to convey their thoughts and in a meaningful way and impacts all of their academic abilities. It impacts them socially and emotionally. This occurs in about 10% of children.
10%.
And yeah, it's a lot. 1 in 10 kids, which is about 2 children in every classroom. It's because of having a brain that makes it difficult to learn vocabulary and grammar. Interestingly, it is the same prevalence or around the same prevalence as dyslexia, yet it's very unknown.
And that's what really concerns me. I don't really hear my teachers talking about DLD. I think if I polled a lot of the teachers that I know, they wouldn't know what the term is. They may know speech and language on an IEP, but what to do to support the students, they might not know. The big buzzword in New York City where I coach right now is dyslexia. And first of all, not every kid has dyslexia. We know for a lot of kids, it might be dyslexia, although we do know there are kids that do have that. But in terms of DLD, I don't hear the term a lot. And I don't know if teachers are prepared to provide the right instruction that supports children with DLD. And possibly there's probably kids that have both DLD and dyslexia. So what are some practical suggestions you have for teachers that are just trying to make it through the day and might not really know how to deal with it?
Such a great question. First, I think, is to really familiarize yourself with some resources. I've been a part of a team called DLD and Me. We have a website. We put teacher-friendly little blurbs. We have informational sheets. We try to talk about different topics like this, like how to identify DLD, what you can do in the classroom, and things like that. So that's, I hope, a teacher-friendly resource that we've been creating.
So can you tell us again where
that's dldandme.org. And that's a website they can go to and learn more about,
And
DLD.
we'll also put that all in the show notes, as always.
Yes, that's great. So DLD is something to look out for in your children, because again, statistically speaking, it's 2 in every classroom. And so this is a hidden disability, though. So with dyslexia, it's hidden too, but you can also see when a child can't read. You can start to see them reading aloud, or you can see
when they're having trouble with phonemic awareness during your drills and so forth, or during phonics instruction.
Exactly. But this is a different situation because children are using language to the best they can. So what we see in children with DLD is that there's those kids who might be shy and hesitant. They're children who might get frustrated. They can't communicate everything they want to communicate, so they may get emotional and have behavioral difficulties. These are children who might try to tell you a story, but it's kind of all over the place, really hard to follow that story.
That I actually see pretty often in classrooms.
Yes, exactly.
But sometimes I don't think we make the connection that that might be a DLD issue.
Exactly. Yes, it is. I mean, it can be an issue with DLD. Another one is that they're the kids who have difficulty learning vocabulary words, for instance. You're teaching new words and you tell them what it is, and then later they're like, what was that? Or they might not be able to recall it. They might say, oh, it's that thingy. It's that stuff.
So does it affect memory?
Affects memory, and especially related to vocabulary memory. They also might be kids who kind of start saying a sentence and just kind of drop off. They don't quite finish it.
So that's interesting. When we work on writing in the schools that I work in or support, I often see kids in general have a lot of trouble, especially in the early grades, with sentence retention.
Mm-hmm.
How does that connect, and is there a connection?
There is a connection. I'm glad you made that connection. It's one of our early identifiers of DLD is to have them repeat sentences back. And the more complete they can repeat them back, the less likely they have language difficulties. And language is on a continuum. So it is tricky because DLD is the lowest end of the continuum. So you have, some that might have, your language stars that just get language and they have really high vocabularies and they have these complex sentences. You have some that are kind of in the middle, and then you have more towards the end. The real hallmark for DLD is they have difficulty learning. So it's those kids that you're like teaching them, vocabulary, for instance, and they just really struggle to remember that word. They're not making those connections. Or in their writing, you see it's much less sophisticated. What we know from studying DLD over time with children is that they follow the same learning of language, but they're delayed. So they might be a couple years behind in their language use. So that makes it tricky too, because you have to have a lot of knowledge about language development to know like what you would expect from a 5-year-old, what you would expect from a 7-year-old.
Are a lot of kids with DLD late talkers?
Yes, they are. Late talking is a hallmark of DLD, but to complicate it, a lot of late talkers don't have DLD.
Right.
They grow out of it. But what do we say is that children who have DLD are almost 100% late talkers, but late talkers are only about 25% DLD.
Now, how do we assess if there's a DLD issue?
That's a great question.
First step is not always to go to, do a full evaluation. How, as a classroom teacher, initially can I say, oh, I think there's an issue, so that I can maybe tell a school-based support team and so forth? What would be some of the first steps?
Yeah, some of the first steps I think is we have 2 kinds of lines. So one is kind of what to do now, and then the other line is what to start to think about doing. What we really need to do is we have MTSS set up for word reading. We're really focusing on getting those multi-tiered systems of support for word reading.
That's right. And what I'm seeing though in schools is there's so much focus on that strand of instruction.
Yes. We need
I'm
the
going to be
same
honest,
thing.
I don't see it.
No, exactly. We need the same thing for language. We need MTSS for language.
Why isn't there the same attention? Why?
I think it's
What's
because
happening?
I think it's because language is quite complex. I think there's a lot of confusion around it. I think that we as a field have also gone back and forth. So it's like focus on language, focus on word reading, focus on language, focus on word reading. The key is we have to do both. And so I think that's been a real tricky part of this is the complexity of how to do both. And teacher preparation programs haven't really focused on language as much. And a lot of it's because of the silos we have. It's like, oh, language, like you said, that's the SLP's job. That's go do that over there. You know what I mean? And then we have, and then we have like, oh, well, reading's this person's job. And so we don't really have systems in place. And a lot of the work I do is to think about systems, because oftentimes it's really not the teacher's fault. It's not the school's fault, but it's the systems that they're in place. So what we do is we have to create some systems. And one of the ways that we've seen, I think has been fantastic, is all the systems created for dyslexia now.
Right.
It's so exciting to see.
But it's taken years.
It's taken years.
In New York City, I've seen a lot of progress. The progress probably started in 2017, but then COVID hit and we lost some traction, and now we're gaining traction. What do you foresee a positive future in terms of getting more support and structure for DLD? Is it going to take us years? And when things take a long time, don't kids lose out?
Absolutely. I'm hoping that DLD can follow in the wake of dyslexia and be faster, because dyslexia has really charted the path. And I'm curious for you, like what started that in 2017 in New York? What was it?
Well, I'm going to actually give credit. There was this woman, Esther Klein-Friedman. There was Andrew Fletcher, and they started an initiative called Universal Literacy in New York City. And for me, that was very exciting because my whole training was balanced literacy. I was reading recovery. And all of a sudden, my principal at that time said, reading recovery is done. I was traumatized, but it was the best thing that ever happened to me because I knew something wasn't working. I knew that I wasn't teaching kids how to read efficiently. And New York City started something called Universal Literacy. And it was a total shift where we focused on structured literacy and how to teach kids based on the science of reading. And that's when my whole life changed. But here's the problem a little bit. Initiatives start in New York, then new mayors come, new chancellors come, and it's almost like starting over. But here's the good news. We got a new mayor. The initiative changed, the name of it changed, but the systems and structures stayed. And we're still going in the direction of science of reading, and it's really going well. And I don't think enough people talk about that there's actually great things happening. But my fear is that, there's a mayoral election now. We don't know what's going to happen. I just pray that we stay the course, that, literacy is not really a political issue. Literacy affects all kids, all people. And I think that we have to just stay the course no matter who's in charge.
I agree.
What do you think?
I agree. And actually, it's so great to hear that, because I'm hoping that those systems that you said kind of kept going. I'm hoping those systems are what we can use to help with language. Because once we have those systems in place, like the idea that we have universal screening. We have universal screening for word reading. We need to think about universal screening for language. Now that we have the mechanism in place for universal screening for word reading, and we have the ideas that, oh, this is what we do, adding another layer into that, I think will make a huge difference. And that's what I want to see, is adding that layer in. It's kind of
like, how do we get those screeners into the hands of teachers? Are they already developed?
Well, they're being developed right now, which is amazing. And there's some that are totally developed.
Okay, so which ones are developed?
Yes.
Catch me up.
Well, this is the number one question people ask me. What screener should we use? And I always say, you really got to take a look at what fits in your system. So it depends on the curriculum you're using. It depends on the word reading screening you're using. A lot of the word reading screeners now.
I'm going to give an example. I use Acadians in my school.
Yeah. So they're starting to develop some language screeners that go with it. So that's what we really need to do.
So the screening companies are now.
Yes, they are. I actually just talked to publishers. Gosh, I was a couple months ago through the Reading League. I met with all the publishers, like all these publishers, to talk about what do we need to do for language screening. And they all have the mechanism in place. They just need to really start developing it more and getting it into the hands of teachers.
Now, do you think teachers are going to be like, oh my gosh, there's something else on our plate? Is that going to happen initially? Or do you think teachers are ready to say, wow, this is the missing piece. We haven't focused on this.
I hope that it's the second part. I think that they'll say the missing piece. I talk to teachers all the time, and when I tell them about DLD, what it is, and they start thinking about it, they're like, oh, I get it. I do see those kids. The other thing we know is that these kids will have struggles later on, but they're like the late emerging ones. Those kids who seem to fall off a cliff after third or fourth grade, they seem like they're doing well, but then it's like, oh no, now they're struggling.
Tell me a little bit more about that.
Yeah.
So give me an example.
So those are kids who seem to be reading words okay. They're kind of hanging on. And, maybe they're getting, even if they're getting good word reading instruction, they kind of keep going. They're getting some support. And maybe they've even made improvement in word reading, but they can't comprehend what they're reading. And this really shows up primarily, it'll show up really well in like third and fourth grade, because if you think about reading comprehension in the first, second, third grade, that's limited by the words they can read. I mean, a first grade book, a book that a first grader can read includes very basic language because they have to be able to read the words.
True, but the oral reading fluency on some of the screeners is pretty intense.
It is, and that can pick up on these language difficulties.
It can.
So
what would be a red flag? Say I'm doing a screener and I'm doing an oral reading fluency on a kid, and the kid read the passage, and then if I ask that student to retell and they're having difficulty to retell, is that one of the red flags?
Absolutely. That's it. Absolutely. They have difficulty with fluency and they have difficulty retelling. And in particular, they have difficulty if you tell them a story, take the word reading out of it, and you tell them a story, they're going to have difficulty recalling it.
When they're listening to it as well.
Exactly. Yes.
So that auditory.
The auditory part, they have difficulty following complex instructions. So they're the kids who might be looking around like you give 3-step instruction. They're like, what are we supposed to do?
So they would probably benefit from maybe like a to-do list or a job list or something.
Yes. Let me talk about the strategies because I think it's really helpful. So when teachers,
oh my God, you said a word that I love, strategies.
Yes,
because sometimes kids need explicit instruction.
They do.
I don't know. The word strategies has gotten so much attention online and people either love it or hate it, or it always seems controversial. But to me, it kind of always made sense that kids need strategies so that they know what to do, or just like, okay, this is what I do first, like a process.
Yeah, exactly. I think strategy.
That's how I see it.
I agree. But
maybe I'm wrong.
I don't know. I'm also like you, or I'm like, oh, I think strategies has a bad reputation now.
I don't understand.
But I think it's more just having to do with kind of how it's been used in the past. For me, I think of strategies as support, as scaffolding. Maybe I should call scaffolding instead.
Okay,
maybe
that's how I see it.
What's controversial word, but basically, with children have difficulty understanding language. One of the best things you can do is provide something permanent for them, like something in writing or picture support. Also, breaking down complex language. So, saying instead of doing 3-step directions, do one, make sure they understand it. Do the next one, make sure they understand it.
Wonderful.
Those kinds of things.
And I think that's actually really helpful to all students. And it's something that we've been working with in the building that I support. We're really into process charts. How am I doing something? What am I doing when I go back to my desk? A lot of kids, maybe they don't even have DLD. Maybe they do. Don't remember what the teacher just told them to do. And if they could do little check boxes, okay, this was step 1.
Yes, exactly.
This was step 2. I think that would help all children. Do you agree?
Does. Yes. And you know what? You hit on an important point. What you said was, this will help all children. We know that about dyslexia. Everything that helps children with dyslexia, systematic explicit phonic instruction, that helps all children. Everything I say for DLD is helpful for all children. So having multisensory kind of instruction around vocabulary, say it, write it, talk about the meaning, child-friendly definitions, saying it in multiple sentences, multiple opportunities to talk about it. All of those things help.
So you just said something so important. Talk about it.
Yes.
I don't see enough time to talk about it in classrooms. I see a lot of classrooms where time is very restricted. I also see where people are trying to squeeze things into a literacy block and things are almost working like in silos rather than together. And I feel like teachers have a lot of pressure. I need to get this done and this done and this done. And I feel like conversations aren't happening enough. When I was in the classroom, maybe we had too many conversations. I do like to talk. All my listeners know that. But how do we make sure that language, and that's the theme of this conference, which I'm so grateful that, Nell and Terry prioritized this concept. How do we make sure that there's more time for language in our classrooms?
Yeah, you hit on such a good point. I think that we have to make time for language and get comfortable with the chaos of language, get comfortable with the idea that we're going to have loud classrooms talking and it's okay to talk to each other, and to really focus on that conversation back and forth, but allowing ourselves the time and space to have those conversations. And that's different than kind of check like, oh, I've got to get this done. I've got to get this done. But one thing we could do is, if we want to work within the system, we want to build time in that system to say this 30-minute period, we're really going to talk. We're going to talk to each other. We're going to think about it. That might be.
So give me an example of like what part of my literacy block that might be. And
yeah, so I think in terms of, this is where we're trying to figure it out. And something I'm very passionate about is implementation science, which is
me
how do we
too.
Right? How do we, these are questions we don't know. We haven't really solved this yet.
Right.
But what I've seen schools doing, which I think is really helpful, is in the literacy block, really saying, we're going to really think about comprehension in a very explicit way. We're going to talk about the vocabulary of this book. We're going to read books that challenge us. We're not going to be limited by, can you read the words in this book? We're going to be open to reading chapter books and having book clubs and having those discussions and really focusing them on the specific words that they need.
And
to
that
understand.
sounds great. And we all know how important read alouds are for
Yes.
kids. But I'm seeing that a lot of these core curriculums that are being pushed into the schools have little excerpts of passages. And they also have a lot of things that the kids can't read, which is okay. But how do we make it work when we're being given materials that might not be conducive to that, or being told there's no time for a read aloud anymore? What do we do? Because very often teachers don't have full control of what's happening.
Absolutely.
So what do we do?
Yes, I think there's two levers. You have what you mentioned, the curriculum, and sometimes you don't have control over that. But what you do have control over is how you use that curriculum and the knowledge you have. So I think we have to think about better curriculum. We need that with language. And then we need to have better teacher training. I'm going to do a shout out to the Reading Universe, also an amazing resource for teachers that's part of Reading Rockets. And that's really a great, I've been working with them in full disclosure to kind of get some more teacher training modules. And so what we're trying to think about is really breaking language down. Like when you're thinking about vocabulary, here's what it would look like to teach vocabulary. And you could teach it across the curriculum.
Are they going to be asynchronous or in person?
No, that's all online, and the videos are online and they're being developed right now. And then we try to think of it in terms of like sentences. So, words, sentences, and then also passages or like connected sentences. But what you can do then as a teacher is, once you have the power of knowing how to teach a vocabulary word, what's so amazing about it is that you can use that routine of teaching vocabulary words, not only in your ELA block, but in science, in social studies, in math. Math is full of language.
Exactly.
Yes.
Now, does DLD present itself in other content areas as much as it does in your typical ELA block?
Absolutely, because we are swimming in language. The school day is full of language. And if you struggle to pick up on those concepts, it affects all areas of academics and social skills for children with DLD.
So let me ask you another question. How do you turn research into real everyday impact for educators? How do we take that research? Because every day, and Faith knows how I feel, and she's probably watching me right now or will later, we see so many research studies. How do we take that research, interpret it as teachers, and make sure that it's being applied in the classroom correctly?
Well, first, I think it's owning the fact that we have research, and research is done in very controlled environments. And the goal of research is to look at causation. So did we have a causal relationship here? I think the mistake we've made, I think, in the science of reading is assuming that we can create a research article that's a study that shows a concept, a fact, and then expect it to just automatically be implemented because it wasn't done for that reason.
Exactly. So do you think researchers should be more mindful of that? That teachers sometimes need help with and support on how to make sure and what it looks like in a real actual classroom? I think we're trying to do that on the literacy view.
Absolutely.
And I think that's been critical, having those conversations, because I think that was totally missing in a lot of the education field before. The researchers were here, the teachers were here, and there wasn't enough communication.
Absolutely. Really, it's going to be in the partnership. It's ultimately going to be in research practice partnerships where we're going to see that magic happen. And that's a critical component of implementation.
Do you think that the researchers are very involved in designing all these core curriculums that are being thrown into all these classrooms? Because sometimes I think people will say this is research-based or evidence-based, and I'm not sure if, the researchers were really spoken to carefully, because some of the things that I see don't look like they're best for kids.
100%.
I have to say
I
it.
think I'm so glad you said it.
I have
Truth
to say
power. I mean, you got to say it. And the truth is that's another silo that we deal with. Silos are really killing us in general. They're killing our literacy outcomes. You have the publishers in a silo, you have the researchers in a silo, you have teachers in a silo, and they're not working together. The more we can work together, then the better it's all going to be.
How do we make that happen more?
I think it's going to have to be really the voices. I think it's going to be grassroots. And I think that I'm really inspired by the grassroots movement for dyslexia, because I think that's how a big part of how we got dyslexia into the schools is that grassroots movement.
Tell me more about the grassroots.
I think it's the parents saying,
that's what, I have to give credit again to my co-host Faith that's not here. She said, Judy, the parents are the ones that foster that change. That's why she wrote a lot of books to encourage the parents, because the parents very often, not always, are the squeaky wheels that will open their mouth.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I have to say, though, I don't see as many parents where I work. I work in a poor school district. I feel those parents should be screaming from the rooftops, too, when their kids can't read.
Mm-hmm.
It really concerns me. But we actually did an episode about that on the Literacy View, and it was with my friend Isabel Simmons and Trey Hadrick. They're both African-American. And I said, why do I see so many white suburban moms on social media screaming and screaming and screaming, and not as many, African-American women and so forth? And it was explained to me because a lot of times those communities have so much stigma already and are pain that it's not very easy to say, hey, my kid is struggling with reading. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I also learned from Trey that there's this assumption that, kids go to school and that they're going to get what they need and the schools are going to get it right. But we know that's not always the case. And if your kid can't read, what do you suggest to parents? What do they do?
I think it's,
I think if a parent worries that their kid has DLD.
I think that it is being the squeaky wheel, really just standing up. But it's easy for me to say that when I'm not in that situation. It's hard to rely on systems that have oppressed you. You don't really want to go to a system for support that has systematically oppressed you. So I think it's community-based. It's community. It's talking to other parents. It's saying, hey, this isn't working for me. How do we work together? I do think it's the community drive.
I agree with you.
And then I think the community will change the system, because the system has to be changed.
I agree. And I'm really excited that this year I work in a really poor school district. We're actually bringing in a partner called Link.
Oh,
they're volunteering to work with me and my school.
Oh, wow.
And we're going to actually do professional development for our parents about what is the science of reading, what kind of games can you play with your kids at home, because it can't be the parents do one thing, the speech language pathologist does another thing. And I also think here's another thing. How can we get people that are outside of the classroom, not the classroom teacher, to also be speaking the same language? Like when they go to science, when they go to a different cluster, what are your recommendations for that?
I think that we have to learn lessons from other movements. I think dyslexia is a great movement. Another movement I'm inspired by is the ADHD movement. If you look at ADHD in the past, those kids were just seen as disruptive. They were true. Behavior difficulties. And then there was a rise up of like, what is ADHD? What is this? It's neurobiological. These children are doing the best they can. And what we know is that then over time, we've seen some of the accommodations for children with ADHD are seeping into all schools. So I know that when I go into my son's classroom who has ADHD, when my older son had ADHD, he got accommodations. He was able to sit on a bouncy ball or take breaks. But now what I see with my youngest is that all children are allowed to do that in the classroom now.
But that's not everywhere.
But that's not everywhere. I agree. But that's kind of best practice.
Of course it is.
Right.
Of course it is. But I think that some people are so rigid, and some people will make a big deal about something that's not a big deal. Like, for instance, I've had students in my classroom when I was a classroom teacher, there was always the kid that had a broken pencil, that had to look around for a broken pencil. Maybe the kid had to move around.
Right.
So I think that just in general, we have to start being more sensitive rather than like being inflexible, and realizing that, kids have so much going on. Mm-hmm. And if we're not like taking that time to care for people as humans and be more accepting, we're just missing it.
I agree. I don't know if you were at the Moonshot event that we had, and I've been working with Learning Alliance down in Vero Beach, California.
Oh, nice.
Vero Beach, Florida. And they have this Moonshot goal, and they have a lab school where they're really focusing on getting the literacy rates up. And it's community driven. And what really struck me is that their big motto is, we don't try to make adults comfortable. We focus on the kids. A lot of what we do is really allowing adults to be comfortable.
That is
it's powerful, right? Because that's not our job.
And this might be a little controversial, but it's the literacy view. Faith always says, you know what? The kids don't have a union.
That's right. Exactly. Oh,
They don't have a union.
Absolutely true. Absolutely true.
Why is it always not in the
Yeah.
best interest very often of kids? And I think that the kids are the most important. And we do have to listen, teachers are important too. I'm a teacher,
Yeah.
but we always have to think about the needs of our kids too. So why are you at Big Sky? What's the core message that you hope to amplify here at Big Sky, at the Big Sky Literacy Summit?
I have two messages that I'd like to amplify. One is, of course, right in the theme, language is everything. But one message that I want to amplify, and I'm grateful for you for the opportunity, is to talk about children with developmental language disorder. These are children who have a neurobiological difference. They have difficulty learning language. They've been completely left behind, and we have to focus on them. And the reason I brought ADHD up is because ADHD used to be that way. Now ADHD is a household name.
That's true.
We know what ADHD. If a teacher has a child with ADHD in their classroom, they don't blame the child. They say, oh, you have ADHD. You were born this way. And that's what I want for children with DLD. I want it to be a household name. I want teachers to understand that this is how they were born. And I want teachers to feel that they have the actual ability to scaffold language learning. And that's a big message here that I want to get across at Big Sky. The second message I want to get across is around implementation science. There's a gap between what we know and what we do. And in the past, it's been blamed on the teachers. Like, well, we told you what to do. Why aren't you doing it? That's not how it is. It's about system change. It's about leadership. And it's about working together and empowering teachers to do what's right. And I hope those two messages come across at Big Sky.
When do you think it will become a household name? What's your gut feeling?
I've been so excited for what's happening. I am hoping within the next 5 years.
Okay.
That's what I'm hoping.
That's reasonable.
That would be my goal. I think I'm excited about the crescendo that's happening. It's a label that has been used forever, but has recently been catalyzed as the label that we're using for these children. So I'm hoping we can systematically make some change. And we have been. I'm excited to say that in the DSM-5, we now have DLD listed. This is part of the DLD and Me advocacy work. In the ICD-11 codes, the new codes, we have DLD listed. The federal government said that DLD is a category that can qualify children for support services through IDEA, and we just got that last year. So I think we're seeing a lot of change that's occurring. Yourself and this podcast, these opportunities, and Dr. Nell and what she's doing for Language is Everything.
It's incredible. First of all, to see a speech language pathologist host a conference on this topic and seeing her with educators like myself, that brings me so much hope because like I said, the speech therapists, they're downstairs in a basement, a different section of the building. Sometimes the teachers don't even know their names. It's the person that picks up the kids. How can we work together? It has to happen. And I hope that this conference is a start. So I have some other questions for you. What should educators understand about the lifelong nature of DLD?
Well, this is where I'm going to tie it back to ADHD. So when you have a child in your classroom that has ADHD, there's no teacher that thinks, I'm going to cure ADHD. The teacher thinks this child has ADHD and they're going to have it their whole life. And we need to support them along the way. That's what I want for DLD. To recognize that this child has developmental language disorder, they're going to have it for a lifetime.
So it does not go away.
It doesn't go away, and my job is to support them. It's a little different that way than dyslexia. We can make major changes.
Major, right?
Do not get me wrong, like early intervention for language, huge gains over time. But is language still going to be something that's difficult for them? In the longitudinal data, that's what we show. But it doesn't mean that they can't make improvements. Just like with ADHD, you have a child with ADHD, they're really struggling. You provide them great behavioral strategies. You provide them an environment that supports them. You see, the sky's the limit. It doesn't limit them. I want to see that for DLD.
Now, what professions have you seen a lot of DLD students be able to accomplish? Do they have as optimistic as a future? In order to accomplish great things? Will this hold people back?
Any field. I've seen them. There's speech pathologists who are DLD. They're talking about their lived experiences. There's artists, designers, CEOs. It really is sky's the limit. I mean, just like every person, they have individual strengths and weaknesses. And the more support they get around DLD and accommodations for DLD, they can do anything.
That's really great. That's really, really great. All right. So this is your time to tell me your top 3 things that you think are BS in relation to DLD. It's called the literacy view, and we have to talk about BS. So
Okay.
here you go.
Okay, BS number one, that these children aren't smart. The reason why that's said is because IQ tests are made up of verbal IQ and nonverbal IQ. So if you give a child with DLD a verbal IQ test, they're going to look like they have intellectual disability.
Wow.
Because that would be like saying, I'm going to test the intellect of a child with dyslexia. Here, read these words. It
So
is a
does that
total
mean that the
underestimate.
IQ might be
Total underestimate.
underestimate of their intellectual
Absolutely.
capacity?
And the
Wow.
other thing is it stops potential, because they're like, oh, they're functioning at their quote unquote potential. They see IQ as potential. Like, oh no, they're at their potential. Not true. We do not see that. They can rise above that because that's their area of weakness. Nonverbal IQ is a better approximate, but even nonverbal IQ has verbal mediation. So using IQ discrepancy is particularly devastating for children with DLD because they're not going to have the discrepancy. They're not going to get services. So the biggest BS is language is not intellectual ability. It is not your potential.
Did you all hear that? All right, that's one. So
the next one that's BS is the fact
you're good at this. You're good at this. Some people are like, oh my God, Judy just asked me to say 3 things that, or Faith just asked the 3 things that are BS. All right, what's the next one?
I've been thinking about
You're ready.
I've been thinking about it.
And I did not tell her the question.
No, I didn't know this would come up, but I mean, I've been thinking about it just in general.
That's awesome.
All the misinformation that's out there. Okay. The next BS is that children with DLD belong to the speech language pathologists. They're just there for the speech language pathologists. They take them out and fix them, and that's their job. No, children with DLD belong to all of us. They are all of our children. We have to support them. That's what we have to do. So we have to break down the silos and we have to all take responsibility. These are our kids. How do we support them? Whether you're a speech language pathologist, a parent, whether you're a principal, whether you're the PE teacher, it doesn't matter. We need to learn how to support these children. Okay, now the third one I might have triggered with. I'm like, oh, I was so locked and loaded for those 2. Let's see, the third BS.
I mean, if you only do 2, I won't be mad at you.
Okay, well, those are the top 2, I think.
All right. Also, I just had another question that came to mind. It wasn't on my paper. Do we see a lot of DLD with kids on the spectrum and with autism?
Yeah, so there's an overlap. So basically, and this is a good point. So children with DLD, they have a 50% chance of having dyslexia. So there's a 50% overlap.
Right.
There's a lot of overlap. Once you have one neurodiversity, the possibility of having another one is very strong. The other thing, I did think of I thought of my third BS.
Wow.
Yes, I did. My third BS is not necessarily related to DLD.
You're definitely a no BS bestie. I really like you. I'm so happy. Faith said I was going to like you, and I really, really like you.
Well, I love that you have this opportunity because I've
is
never had the opportunity to talk about BS like this. So the other one, the last one I'll have is less related to DLD, but more related to implementation. It is total BS that teachers are told you should read a research article and know what to do in the classroom.
That's right.
It doesn't happen. There's no way. That gap, P.S., how do teachers even read a research article when many of them are behind paywalls? That you can't even access them.
That's true. And that's even the case with a lot of newspapers. Faith will be like, oh, Judy, did you see that article? I'm like, Faith, I'm not paying money to read every newspaper.
Absolutely. It's really, it's huge. So that's BS. We can't expect educators to just automatically somehow know how to take a research article that wasn't written for them, that's behind a paywall, that was done in very controlled conditions, and somehow they're supposed to just figure it out.
All right. I need you to tell me 3 things that are not BS, 3 things that we should be celebrating in literacy when it comes to DLD.
Wow. Why is this harder?
Celebrations are good.
I know. I should be. Well, I do want to celebrate the fact that there is getting some major momentum around DLD.
I see it.
It's happening.
It's amazing.
It's right in line with language, and I'm just so excited about that. So
I think that's great.
Celebration.
And I agree with you because I've had so much professional training in the last 8 years that was about decoding and teaching kids how to decode multisyllabic words and all of that. But I haven't really gone to a conference that is primarily focusing on language and how it relates to all those other things and comprehension and vocabulary. And I think that that's such a step in the right direction. And I think, I think we have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable because I think very often there's things that we feel like we're not experts in that we know well. And sometimes we're scared to delve into things that we maybe don't know as well. And that's why I'm really excited for myself professionally to push myself. I don't know everything. And that's also why I'm here to continue learning.
Absolutely.
And I think that growth mindset is something to cheer.
Actually, yes, I think that's fantastic. I feel like I'm at the Oscars or something, and I'm trying to say thank you because I do want to shout out a few people that have really been.
Can you please do that?
Well, Dr. Nell, of course, making language
Incredible,
in DLD.
right?
Reading Rockets just added a DLD section to their neurodiversity section, so it's right there with autism.
Will you share that so I can put it in the show notes?
Absolutely.
Okay, good.
And Reading Universe right there, just focusing on language. I think these are huge. The DLD and Me team, Rattle, which is raising awareness of DLD, having all these events across the world talking about DLD. There's just so much momentum. The Reading League has been focusing on DLD.
Is it just the United States that you see focusing on DLD?
No, actually, I think we're the laggards on that.
We are.
Yes. So other countries have been ahead of us in this
Who's
way.
leading?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'd say the UK and Australia are really leading right now. There's the DLD project, which is out of Australia, and they have the first DLD international conference, and they really share lived
a conference
experiences.
that's devoted
just to DLD.
Have you been to that conference?
Yes, I have. I've been.
Wow, Faith! I think Faith. You know we want to go to Australia.
Yes.
Faith.
Well, I had to break it to you. It's virtual. Bummer. I know. You can still go to Australia. We've studied this. I mean, there is a conference that studies language disorders broadly, and that's been happening every year in Wisconsin. And that's been fantastic. But focused just on DLD and lived experience, that's fairly new, and that's out of Australia. So that's to be celebrated. So much to be celebrated.
That's awesome. All right. So to wrap things up for today, what are some of your favorite classroom routines that put language first?
Oh, I think vocabulary routines are a huge one. And that's basically saying, all the scientific evidence around vocabulary, reading ahead, teacher looking ahead of time, saying these words could be tricky, pre-teaching them with child-friendly definitions, connecting them to words they already know, having children say them in lots of different sentences, point them out in the book, talk about them, share their experiences about them, write it down, all of these things to get the vocabulary richness. That's huge. And that could be a big impact. The next one is just talking about DLD. Something I always tell my audiences is I give them a challenge. Talk about DLD 5 times this week. Talk about it with your friends. Talk about it with your family. Talk about it with your colleagues. Just say, hey, I learned about DLD. This is what this is. Share an informational sheet. It's going to spread like wildfire the more we do that.
That's amazing. Tiffany, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me.
Is there anything else you'd want to share with the audience before we say goodbye?
I just want to thank you for doing this, Judy. And you and Faith are making big differences and showcasing DLD. I just want to thank you so much. And I want to thank you for those in this world who have DLD because it's making a big difference.
Thank you. Thank you. Will you be back one time or in the future if we want to continue
I'd be happy
these
to talk to you
conversations?
more. I'd be honored.
Great. Thank you so much.